My name is Kyle Kroeger. I'm on staff with Fellowship Church. And I have come up with a master plan to grow spiritually. And not just grow, but grow crazy fast. Many of you have already tried to create a master plan. And some of you are probably actually working on it this semester. But you aren't going to be able to do as good of a job as me because I have lived in this town for 11 years. So I know the ropes. But you don't have to do it anymore because I've done it for you. I've done the research, I've checked the facts, and I've mapped out the plan, and I'm going to share it with you. Are y'all ready? No one? One person? All right. This is going to be good. All right. So we need to establish one thing real quick before I give you this mysterious master plan. To be like Christ, we need essentially 7 things. 1, we need great doctrine. We need to know the Bible. Jesus understood the Bible better than anyone, and we need to know what we're supposed to believe or what we are to believe. Evangelism. Jesus solved the depravity problem, and we need to tell people about it. Worship. We need to worship God. In fact, we get to worship God. This is one of the beautiful things about being like Christ. Prayer. Prayer is the life force of what we're doing. We need to be spending time with God praying. Community and discipleship. We need people that know who we truly are. People that will keep us accountable. People that will encourage us towards good and towards God. Service. Taking care of the widows and the orphans, the poor and the oppressed. Missions. We don't want to just evangelize without any direction. We want to be part of God's mission to reach the world. So essentially, these are the elements of being like Christ. You could probably break some up or put others together. And we're going to build our master plan around these 7 areas. And we're going to build that master plan around our school schedule. This is my schedule. I'm a freshman, taking 16 hours, but only 1 lab, so it's not too overwhelming. Almost freed up my Friday, but couldn't get out of that 8 o'clock. And as we know, we're supposed to study twice as long as we're in class, so let me add some study time. So I can be flexible with those hours, but I need to make sure that I'm getting in my 48 hours for school. I want to be a good student, but I don't want to just be a good student. I want to be incredibly close to God. I want to grow as fast as I possibly can to be like Jesus. And I know that to be like Jesus, I need great doctrine. I need to know the Bible. This man right here is Brian Fisher. He's the lead pastor at Grace Bible Church, and this man knows how to teach the Bible. Out of everyone in all of Bryan College Station, this man is probably the most qualified and most effective at teaching what the Bible is saying, its context, and its application. If I want to learn the Bible, he's the best College Station has to offer. So naturally, when Brian Fisher's teaching on the Bible, I want to be there because I want to have great doctrine. Right now, he's teaching through Acts 9:15 on Sunday mornings, and I don't want to miss that, so I'm going to put that on my schedule. I realize the schedule's a little too small for you to read, but I'm just trying to give you a visual. You don't have to read what it says. Evangelism. We've got to spread the good news. And no one in College Station does that better than the BSM. These guys know that the way to really get college students to come hear the gospel is through food. So I'm going to help them pass out pancakes once a month. I'm going to join maybe their Friday lunches, move things around, or maybe join one of their evangelism teams. But these guys are effective at sharing the gospel, and I want to be a part of that. Worship. I want to be part of epic worship. I don't want to miss that. I'm going to add an hour for traffic because Breakaway is the best worship College Station has to offer. Next is prayer. And Central Baptist has prayer rooms, which are the perfect place for me to have my quiet times. They even provide coffee. Community and discipleship. Believe it or not, there is a church in this town that has this crazy emphasis on something called a home group. And they emphasize these home groups so much that there are more people that attend their home groups than actually attend their church. These home groups are powerful and life-changing. People really get to know each other, and they encourage each other towards good. So I'm going to add that to the schedule, but I'm going to choose a Wednesday home group because Life Church here in town is really serious about feeding the poor, and they do their thing on Thursday. In fact, every single Thursday, they're feeding the poor. How awesome is that? I want to be a part of that. Missions. I want to be part of God's mission to reach the world. This man's name is Tyler Hardy. He's the lead pastor at Antioch. And I don't know him personally, but but my friends that do know him tell me that this man is passionate about overseas church planting. So I'm going to plan on going on a mission trip with Antioch. Okay, so this is the master plan. Many of you, whether you've realized it or not, have been striving for this. You want to grow in those 7 areas, so naturally you start looking for the most effective ways of growing in each of those areas. But it isn't rocket science. Aside from some preference, you're going to learn best from the best. And I just did it for you. After being here for 11 years, I'm telling you, those guys are the best, or at least tied to the best. This is what you've been looking for. And if you do this master plan, the events you attend will be phenomenal and life-changing. But you will also be destroying the church. You won't see it because you're just one person. It'll be hardly noticeable because you're one of thousands. But the master plan constitutes taking from the church and not giving anything back. You'd be giving to the poor. You'd be giving to non-believers. But you wouldn't be giving anything to the church. And if every Christian did this, if every believer followed the master plan, then there wouldn't be a church. Dear Heavenly Father, I pray that you would bless this morning. Let me hear exactly what you want them to hear. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Many of you that have been in a home group that I've led might be in shock right now because in all the times that you've run after a master plan, I've never made you feel quite like I just did. I want to clarify that I've been honored to help you grow spiritually, and I don't care if you haven't given back to the church what you've gotten out of it. I want to do that for you. The whole reason I'm in college ministry is because this is a crazy opportunity for you to grow. And these other ministries feel the same way. They're like, it's okay if you're a mooch for a little while. They want you. To a degree, they don't care if you give back. However, there's a mindset behind the master plan that has been destroying the church in America. For better or for worse, we live in a culture that is saturated with consumerism. And there's some benefits to that. The other day, I saw a Christian movie with decent acting. It's true. And that's because of consumerism. Quality is a product of consumerism, but so is selfishness. And as we continue down this path of consumerism, the church is becoming more and more about what the paid employees of the church can produce for everyone else. Our view of the church is becoming increasingly selfish. Again, not all of that is bad. The church has something great to offer, and it's good that people are seeking after that. But if in the process, the design of the church changes, so do the benefits. So let's look at God's design, what God's design is for us as we interact with the church. 1 Peter 2, 1 through 5. Therefore, rid yourselves of all malice and all deceit, hypocrisy, envy, and slander of every kind. Like newborn babies, crave pure spiritual milk, so that by it you may grow up in your salvation, now that you've tasted that the Lord is good. As you come to him, the living stone, rejected by humans but chosen by God and precious to him, you also, like living stones, are being built into a spiritual house to be a holy priesthood, offering spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. So let's break this down. Therefore, rid yourselves of all malice and all deceit, hypocrisy, envy, and slander of every kind. This is kind of a basic message. Now that you're free from your sin, we need to start getting rid of that sin. And then he says, like newborn babies, crave pure spiritual milk, so that by it you may grow up in your salvation, now that you've tasted that the Lord is good. Now that you've accepted Jesus Christ, now that you've tasted that the Lord is good, crave spiritual milk. Peter is inviting new believers to be self-seeking towards the church. When a baby wants milk, it maxes out its vocal cords to stop all life until it gets what it wants. Crave, like a baby, crave spiritual milk. This is similar to what I was saying earlier. When you're a young believer, we don't care if you give back to the church what you're getting out of it. We want you to grow up in your salvation, and we are happy. We're happy to be the ones. I can speak for all these ministries. We are happy to be the ones to sacrifice for that to happen. But then Peter explains the purpose. He reveals the long-term plan. He says, you are being built into a spiritual house to be a holy priesthood, offering spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. You are being built into a holy priesthood. There's no separation here between those that are paid to do ministry and those that are not. The design is that all of us are offering spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God. The design is that all of us are contributing members of Jesus' church. One of the problems of being part of multiple ministries is that it makes it very difficult to graduate from newborn to priest. It's hard to be a priest within a church, to be a leader, to be a contributing member without being part of and buying into that community. There's so many times that, I've had in my home group, other staff have had in this home, we've talked about it, how we've seen these people that were like, man, you're ready. You are ready to become a priest. We don't use that terminology when we talk to each other, but you're ready. We're ready to become a priest. And then when we try to help them graduate to that point, them being part of multiple ministries gets in the way. Best case scenario, they realize it, they break all ties with all but one ministry, and they become a contributing member of that body of believers. And that's okay. You know what? If you work the master plan and you end up in that spot, that's at least it's okay with me. But you should know that the longer you are part of those ministries that you end up breaking up with, the more it hurts when you leave. There have been people in our home group that we've cried when they've left. And my wife has shed a lot of tears over some amazing women that have been part of our home group, and then they've left. And we agreed that they should leave. We were excited for them to take that next step. We even agreed that the Lord was leading them to that other ministry instead of ours. But it still hurt. They were in our home group for a long time, and we're sad when they leave. Worst case scenario, they don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, or they don't want to give up those relationships, or they just like being fed in that way, and they never advance to priest. And what is sad is, in my observation, in my experiences, and what I've seen, if you don't graduate from newborn to priest while you're in college, there's a good chance you never will. I don't know if that's because of our culture. I imagine that has something to do with it, or because we're getting busier once we graduate. But what I've seen, this is my experience, this isn't the Bible, this is my experience. What I've seen is that if you don't advance from newborn to priest while you're in college, there's a chance that you never will. Hebrews 13:17. Have confidence in your leaders and submit to their authority, because they keep watch over you as those who must give an account. Do this so that their work will be a joy, not a burden. That would be of no benefit to you. When you are following the master plan, then you are the spiritual authority in your walk. Immediately, some of you are thinking, no, that's not true. I have lots of spiritual mentors. And I'm not denying that, but I want to point out that there's a big difference between a discipler and someone of whom you ask for counsel. A counselor hears what you have to say from your point of view and gives you advice that you interpret and then you apply. And then for the most part, you determine how well you are doing. And that's not bad. Autonomy is a beautiful thing, and it has its place. But I would argue that that's not submitting to authority. A discipler, on the other hand, knows your business because y'all have been doing life together. In addition to that, they probably know more about the situation that you're talking about. If Wes and Arturo were having a disagreement, I would already know both of their strengths and weaknesses. And I'd probably know a little bit about the situation already, which is a big deal when you're trying to mentor someone. Jeremiah 17:9, the heart is deceitful above all else. Do you have someone that can keep your heart from lying to you? Several times over the last few years, I've told one of my disciples, would you pray about that again because I think that you're lying to yourself? Would you go back to God and pray about the same thing over again because I don't think you're seeing clearly? I don't think I've ever been able to do that with someone that is working the master plan. I just don't have enough information to exhort them in that way. When they come to me for advice, it almost always sounds good because I'm limited to see the situation from their point of view, for the most part. It's important to have a discipler of whom you give authority. And a discipler isn't going to be encouraging you towards the master plan. If Sam Baker were to come to me with a desire to feed the poor, I'm not going to go send him to Life Church. Rather, I would encourage him to mobilize his home group to go feed the poor, because that's our church's plan to feed the poor. We're not going to give up on our plan to feed the poor just because there's a church out there that can do it better than us. Can you imagine if every church in town outsourced their teaching of the Bible to Grace? At some point, we have to settle for second best. We need to graduate from our self-seeking attitude towards the church to a selfless one. And let me take that even a step further. I don't recommend that you go find a church that has the same emphasis that you personally do. Some of you might be thinking, well, I'm really passionate about feeding the poor, so I'm going to go join Life Church because they're the best at that. But we need people that are passionate about feeding the poor in our church. Otherwise, we'd become lopsided. We need to change the way we think from what would be best for me to what would be best for the church. Because in truth, in the way it really works, and the way it's at least supposed to work, is that what is best for the church is what's truly best for you. You got to have wisdom when you apply what I just said. But guys, I'm not talking about some crazy sacrifice, some crazy die-to-yourself sacrifice here. All ministries are going to do pretty well in all 7 areas. But they're just not the best. At some point, we have to settle for second best. But you know what's encouraging? God can teach you more through good, solid Bible teaching in a healthy context than he can through great Bible teaching in an unhealthy one. God can use you more through a good mission trip in a healthy context than he can through a great mission trip in an unhealthy one. There are so many more factors that contribute to your spiritual growth than the quality of an event or presentation. Let's recap real quick. Out of a desire to grow close to God and a consumerist inclination towards quality, we often attempt to utilize the strengths of multiple ministries to develop a master plan. This plan eventually concedes to be self-defeating as it both hinders the transition from newborn to priest and prevents the ability to submit to spiritual authority. There are 2 exceptions to this. 1, I am not talking about the churches in town that team up with other ministries. For example, I've heard that Campus Crusade here at A&M and Grace work together. That's awesome. That's great. That's not what I'm talking about. Number 2, if you are using a ministry for encouragement and growth, but then to pour in to your ministry, your community, that is most of the time fine. That is situationally great. But if you do that, you should probably be inviting your spiritual authority and community into that decision so that y'all can decide together that that is the best decision. One of my leaders came to me last year to seek my blessing to go to Breakaway. He wanted me to weigh in on his decision, and he showed me the steps that he had been taking to make sure that he was growing in his understanding of the Bible. Because he knew that my biggest concern about Breakaway is that it's at the same time as our equipping classes. How beautiful is that? To not only go above and beyond by compensating for what he'd be missing out in equipping classes, but then even after that, inviting his spiritual authority to help him with the decision-making process. I hope that for you guys. So, other than those two exceptions, pursuing anything that looks like the master plan is self-defeating, as it both hinders the transition from newborn to priest and prevents the ability to submit to spiritual authority. So what's the solution? Just as the problem is rooted in the selfish nature of a consumerist mentality, the solution is rooted in a selfless attitude towards the church. When we first join the church, we think, what do I need? Where do I need to grow? What's going on between me and God? But once we grow in our salvation, we are called to join the church as part of it, which requires a selfless attitude towards it. Joining a community, being part of it, being on board with it, being submitted to it, is a selfless act. But it's one that is worth it. I mean, guys, breast milk is probably awesome, but there's a reason we all eat food now. Getting poured into spiritually feels great, but at some point we get to grow up. We are privileged to not be a baby anymore. It may be harder, but guys, we're talking about real church. If God were able to teach us so much as newborns, how much more could he teach us as priests? When you join in with a community of believers and you engage and you stick it out with them through the thick and thin, it's a whole new ballgame. And I hope you get to experience that. I know many of you already are experiencing that. So this teaching is actually a giant setup for next week. Rollin and I have been working together, and next week he's going to take this teaching to a whole new level. No pressure, Rollin. So let's pray.